This thing's worth 100 Pokos? That's more than a year's salary! Whoa. How on Hocotate do these clearly capitalistic folks buy anything? If a Poko is equivalent to $1, then surely they must use something like cents for small purchases, right? Except, if we were to compare the value of a Poko to a Hocotation versus $1 to a US citizen, it would be worth more. Far, far more. What's up, Buttercups? My name is Scaletree, and because it's been on my mind for a while, I wanted to do a short video on a ridiculous subject. You see, for a time, I assisted with payroll for a shipping company that featured international freight. This gives me perspective into the salaries that freight workers realistically make. But even before then, way back when I was just a kid, I always wondered what a Poko was worth. Most of the math I've seen online skews towards devaluing it heavily due to items like the bottle cap in the Pikmin 2 intro cutscene. In real life, a bottle cap to a human being is barely worth anything, so surely a Poko must only be a few cents, if even that, right? Except, this isn't what I mean when I ask what a Poko is worth. I'm not talking about what a Poko is worth to me, an Earthling. I want to know what a Poko is worth to our Hocotation friends. I'll be upfront, this video is just for fun. It's not meant to be taken seriously and used as a guide for fan work. Wikipedia already has a long list of reasons why the value of a Poko cannot be pinned for sure. So, if I use this video as a pilot for a series, I'm considering calling it Math for Laughs. This is purely about doing goofy math because why not? All I hope is that it's enjoyable for enjoyability's sake, even if you disagree with my conclusions. This episode features some simple calculations with a complex web of assumptions for the hell of it, but later ones may require more intricate formulas. All that said, before I talk about the calculations, I want to ensure we're on the same page for set assumptions. The first is that I'm an American, so my comparative math will rely on 2023 averages for international cargo transporters making their money in US dollars. However, since a good chunk of my audience is from overseas, I'll put up visual conversions for the following currencies whenever I calculate a specific value. The second, and more importantly, is that, due to the ambiguity of the Pikmin 2 opening cinematic, there's no way I can place a specific value on a Poko. After all, 100 Pokos isn't a year's salary. It's more. For all we know, the annual salary could be any positive 1 or 2 digit numbers worth of Pokos. As a result, in order to not make too many large leaps, I've decided to look for the minimum value of a Poko, rounded to the nearest whole number. Therefore, I'm assuming a Hocotate freight worker's yearly salary is 99 Pokos. Speaking of Hocotate freight, it looks kind of run down, doesn't it? This is speculation, to be fair, but there's also this expedition log from Pikmin 3, where Olimar complains about how the cheap company spacesuit doesn't keep out the cold. So both of these observations incline me to believe that the wages here aren't exactly great. As a result, I plan to stick to the lower end of real-world salary values. Probably the 25th percentile, meaning any salaries below that value would be an outlier. This has the added bonus in that it plays into the idea that we're calculating the minimum relative value of a Poko. Lastly, we don't have confirmation on the length of a Hocotation day, let alone a Hocotation work year, and I doubt Nintendo is going to whisper that into my ear anytime soon. I have my theories, but they're purely speculative and definitely a topic for another video. So for simplicity, this calculation will rely on 2 suppositions. The first is that a deep space cargo transporter like Olimar or Louis completes an equivalent amount of annual work to an international cargo transporter on Earth. The second is that this work is valued similarly to our own capitalist society. For lack of concrete information, this feels like a decent enough set of assumptions for the premise of this silly math. With all that in mind, I got to research and I had to ask myself a question. Do I use figures for land, ocean, or air freight? My first instinct was ocean or air, given we're talking about spaceships, but since we're going for a minimum, I figured I'd follow whatever had the lowest general salaries. So, sure enough, land lost the money war, which means it won, in a sense, a spot in this video. Which in turn means I can finally get to the actual math! It only took how long now? 2 full pages of script? Oh boy, let's get moving. Our prime suspect for a minimum value here is Louis, whose status as a living, breathing person is worth a meager 10 Pokos. Ouch. But that's the value of his life, not his labor. So for this math, I'll assume 99 Pokos is his annual salary. A standard international truck driver in 2023 averaged $19 an hour, or $39,520 per year in the 25th percentile. Divide that by 99, and we already get a whopping average of $399.19 per Poko. Nearly 400 bucks! That's almost 2 months of grocery shopping for me in a single coin, an obscenely high relative value. But we don't have to stop here. In theory, this minimum could go higher if we considered 99 Pokos to be Olimar's salary instead. We could make this supposition because the Pikmin 2 intro cutscene is primarily the president speaking to him. Now, Olimar's been working for Hocotate Freight for many years compared to Louis' approximate 3 months. Additionally, the narration in that same cinematic describes him as the company's, quote, only employee of any merit. This makes me suspect that he's more likely to be entrusted with bigger vessels and more fragile cargo loads, like a Class A international truck driver. That would bump the base salary up to $29.50 an hour, or to $61,630 a year. Divide that by 99, and this jumps the minimum value of a Poko to $619.80 each. To put this in perspective, let's assume you're a full-time, 40-hours-a-week worker in the United States. This would be the same amount of money you would earn in a week pre-tax working for $15.49 an hour. Just shy of twice the federal minimum wage. In a week. Before taxes. I don't even know what to say, that's just absurd. But wait a moment. What if I told you the rabbit hole could go even deeper? Let's flash back to the start of this video. Who said that line again?
That's more than a year's salary.
Oh boy. That's right, it was the president who said this line. The president owns Hocotate Freight, making him the owner-operator. That's his job. And do you know how much an owner-operator for a land-based international freight business makes in the US each year? Well, the average weekly salary for someone in the president's position is $4,060. But we'll be fair and use the value for the 25th percentile like with Olimar and Louis. This cuts that weekly value down to $1,721. Even going this low, that's an impressive $43.03 per hour, or $89,492 a year. Divide that by 99, and our minimum relative Poko value skyrockets to $903.96 each. More than double the original estimate with Louis' theoretical salary. And do you know the funniest thing about this calculation? It assumes the president wouldn't be the kind of guy who would Scrooge McDuck his money and pay himself at least the average I mentioned, which is over twice the value I used. Hell, he may pay himself even better than that. I'm saying this with love, by the way. I enjoy the president, but what I'm trying to get at is that this relative Poko calculation still feels like an underestimate. Which brings us to our conclusion. What have we learned here? Well, if we go by relative values, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that a Poko doesn't have a smaller subcategory of currency. If we assume day-to-day goods, not treasures, have similar relative value on Hocotate as they would on Earth, you wouldn't whip out the equivalent of $400 to $900 to pay for a run-of-the-mill dinner and a movie, you know? Also, if we plug these Poko numbers in to determine the value of the 100 Poko bottle cap, the original debt of 10,100 Pokos, and the payoff debt of 10,000 Pokos, we get a staggering range of numbers. For the debt alone, with Louis' estimate, we get nearly 4 million smackaroos. Imagine gorging yourself on millions of dollars worth of carrots. This, of course, goes up with Olimar's estimate at about $6.2 million. And with the president's, we get just over $9 million. Good Lord. Another silly note is that, regardless of the version of Pikmin 2 you're playing, there are enough treasures in the game to more than double your money, even if you never grab a single corpse in the caves. So that's a huge additional windfall, a truly fitting result for the act of treasure hunting. But Olimar still doesn't get a decent vacation afterwards. What the fuck? Sorry, I just want to see my man happy. I love you, Olimar. You deserve nice things. And with that, I believe we've reached the end of this video. If you stuck around this long, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my content. I'd love to hear ideas for similar mathematical videos in the future, and would be willing to dig into more complicated math problems later. I just wanted to get started with something silly and simple. Anyway, if you like this video and are interested to see more, I'm sure you know what to do. In the meantime, I've been your hostess Scaletree, and I hope to see you around. Bye, guys!